in the book The Closing of the American Mind. It was a 1987 book by Alan Bloom, and it describes how higher education has failed democracy and it's impoverished the souls of today's students. There is no democracy in America. Turnout rate's an abysmal 30%. And democracy isn't just about voting. Democracy is about being able to deliberate and discuss and to tolerate other people's opinions and to let the minority have their say and the majority get their way. So Alan Bloom, he focuses especially upon the openness of relativism as leading paradoxically to the great closing referenced in a book's title. Bloom argues that openness and absolute understanding undermines critical thinking and eliminates the point of view that defines culture, the closing of the American mind. So because of relativism, because there is no solid framework or foundation, we're starting to see a slipping of the basic values and structures in which we actually need to look at. This is all to get into the great books. The Great Books program is the St. John's College has a Great Books program, and I remember reading an article in College News, World Report, something, I don't know, some article that talked about the life of a mind. And so when you had a 4-year education at St. John's College, you would learn all the great books that, you know, as St. John's had called them. And you would learn, you know, the greatest ideas that Western civilization has ever come up with. Now, there is a problem, I think, with Western civilization. To me, it feels like it's just one big white supremacist apologist history. And in the great pool of ideas, the best ideas should prevail. So therefore, there's the Chinese civilization, there's India, there's Russia, there's Africa, there's South America. There's lots of civilizations that have come before us, and then we also see how we can advance. Whereas you have, Machiavelli writing The Prince, and how power is, that's the cornerstone of political science. It's all about power, and that's all that matters is power, and it doesn't matter how moral or immoral, amoral you are. As long as you get power, power is good, and powerlessness is bad. So I think when I think about Western civilization, I think of what Gandhi said. He says that they should try it. So Western civilization can sound very much like a, what do they call that when it's like the opposite, like jumbo shrimp, and it's an oxymoron. So Western civilization is an oxymoron. So they should try it. So I don't believe in some of the things the Western civilization says, but for the Freedom School, in Jonathan Masters' Freedom School, every year we're going to vote for the 100 greatest books. And this is the gift that the senior class will give to the kindergarten class. Because I guess I do see it being a grade school, because you have to be able to get start to develop a young person's mind at a young age. And it's not to impose our will upon them. There's only 3 required classes that I had. One was the great books. One was relationships. So how relationships work. And then the last one was Robert's Rules of Order, because that's the way, parliamentary procedure that a group of, 30 folks or so, or 100 folks, or how many people are at the school can utilize in order to effectively use, democratic structures in order to get the best decisions made. So let's continue with the closing of the American mind, and we'll get to the great books programs. Okay? So the summary, the closing of the American mind, is a critique of the contemporary university and how Bloom sees it as failing its students. In it, Bloom criticizes the modern movements in philosophy and the humanities. Philosophy professors involved in ordinary language analysis or logical positivism disregard important humanizing, ethical, and political issues and fail to pique the interest of students. Literature professors involved in deconstructionism promote irrationalism and skepticism of standards of truth, and thereby dissolve the moral imperatives which are communicated through genuine philosophy, and which elevate and broaden the intellectuals of those who engage with these imperatives. I've even heard Noam Chomsky say deconstruction. What the fuck is that? People say, oh, we're going to have a debriefing, meaning we're going to throw out the shit that they try to put in your head, and we're going to put in your head what we fucking think. Deconstruction, I understand, the idea is you take someone's idea and then you deconstruct it, right? So you kind of tear it down to its most basic elements, and then you criticize it, and then you feel good about yourself because you're criticizing, some great thinker that came before you. But the It's insanity. It makes no sense. Deconstruct, like, I mean, I understand the general idea, but for it to be like a philosophy or a way of thinking or a way of living, that's just, it's only good for the intellectuals. It won't be good for your life. Good for your life would be the building blocks, the things that you keep, and science and knowledge compounds. So you need to be able to build on knowledge and build on science and build on principles and ideas that you know. So, to a great extent, Bloom's criticism revolves around his belief that the great books of Western thought have been devalued as a source of wisdom. So there it is. For Bloom, they want, was it Alan Bloom? For Alan Bloom, he wants to bring back the great books of Western thought. Now, I think just 100 books of great books. Instead of Machiavelli, we go with the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. That's Machiavelli, but it also has a lot of things from Chinese history, Russian history, and so I think that actually serves as a great basis of which to sort of springboard, because you need to have common historical examples to be able to say, well, what about this thing? What about that thing? And, for you to be able to make good generalizations, you do need a sort of common framework from which to spring off of. If we're all just going to be patriotic and just say how great, all the genocidal, imperialistic psychopaths were just because they were born on the soil. I think actually once you look at the entire scope of American history, there's incredible authors, incredible thinkers who did not get power, who did not get a substantial amount of power, who are worthy of consideration. Frederick Douglass being one of the best examples. So, let's keep going. Alan Bloom's critique extends beyond the university to speak to the general crisis in American society. Closing of the American mind draws analogies between the United States and the Weimar Republic. So the Weimar Republic, this is actually kind of incredible. He's almost saying like the liberalization of America is the problem. And while I can kind of see that you start slipping away from what we had before, that in the great pool of ideas, the best ideas prevail. So therefore, if the ideas of the Roman, intellectuals did not fucking muster, you can get the same knowledge, I guess, and pass it along in different forms. So anyways, I don't know. He's drawing analogies between the United States and the Weimar Republic. The Weimar Republic was when the German revolutionaries took power away from the monarchy and then eventually became a democratic republic, of which it still, exists today. But if he looks at Otto von Bismarck and some of the, the want of a monarchy, the stability of a monarchy as something to achieve to, I think he's woefully wrong. The modern liberal philosophy, he says, enshrined in the Enlightenment thought of John Locke that a just society could be based upon self-interest alone, coupled by the emergence of relativism in American thought, has led to the crisis. So if everybody's doing whatever the fuck they want to do and everybody's talking about relative, ideas, then there's no concreteness. There's no actual foundation from which to actually springboard off of. For Bloom, this created a void in the souls of Americans into which demagogic radicals, as exemplified by the 60 students, leaders could leap. In the same fashion, Alan Bloom suggests that the Nazi brown shirts once filled the gap created in German society by the Weimar Republic. So he's saying because of the lack of sort of firmness of the Weimar Republic, because of the relativism, that opened a vacuum up for the totalitarian fascism of the Nazis. But if the Weimar Republic is to blame, it was totalitarian fascism before the Weimar Republic. In the second instance, he argued the higher calling of philosophy and reason, understood as freedom of thought, had been eclipsed by a pseudo-philosophy or an ideology of thought. Relativism was one feature of modern liberal philosophy that had subverted the Platonic Socratic teaching. One of the best lessons that I got actually from grade school would have been my middle school teacher, Mr. Hahn. He had taught me the scientific method, and I think that's the Socratic method too. The scientific method is the model to experiment. What do you do? How do you learn things? So you have a hypothesis. If I drop this apple, I think gravity will, for it to come down. You drop an apple 100 times, you see that it happens. So therefore, you keep the hypothesis. And that's, through observation, through experimentation, and that's, also the difference between inductive and deductive reasoning. So deductive reasoning is sort of you build knowledge one step at a time. Inductive reasoning is you take all these ideas and then you kind of feel what it is that you wanted to believe. Alan Bloom's critique of contemporary social movements at play in universities and society at large is derived from his classical and philosophical orientation. For Alan Bloom, the failure of contemporary liberal education leads to the sterile social and sexual habits of modern students and to their inability to fashion a life for themselves beyond the mundane offerings touted as success. Bloom argues that commercial pursuits have become more highly valued than love, the philosophical quest for truth, or the civilized pursuits of honor and glory. So honor, glory, love, truth, all these values are being lost by the American sort of relativism. And, the society could be based upon self-interest alone. In one chapter, he examined the philosophical effects of popular music on the lives of students, placing pop music, or as generically branded by record companies, rock music, in historical context from Plato's Republic to Nietzsche's Dionysian longings. Treating it for the first time with genuine philosophical interest, he gave fresh attention to the industry, its target, and making to children and teenagers its top performers, its place in our late capitalist bourgeoisie economy, and its pretensions to liberation and freedom. Bloom, informed by Socrates, Aristotle, Rousseau, and Nietzsche, explores music's power over the human soul. He cites the soldier who throws himself into battle at the urging of the drum corps, the pious believer who prays under the spell of a religious hymn, the lover seduced by the romantic guitar, and points toward the tradition of philosophy that treated musical education as paramount. He names the pop star Mick Jagger as a cardinal representative of the hypocrisy and erotic sterility of pop music. Pop music employs sexual images and language to enthrall the young, to persuade them that their petty rebelliousness is authentic politics, when in fact they are being controlled by the money managers whom successful performers like Jagger quietly serve. Bloom claims that Jagger is a hero to many university students who envy his fame and wealth, but are really bored by the lack of options presented to them. So if American gods are the Mick Jaggers of the world, then where do the Nietzsche's and the Rousseaus go? I do have a problem with Socrates, Aristotle, and Plato, Alexander the Great, because they're all fucking pedophiles. The corner of Western civilization all comes from a bunch of fucking pedophiles. Socrates is fucking Plato, Plato's fucking Aristotle, Aristotle's fucking Alexander the Great. And so, these are the fucking men that we're going to put up on a mantle and say, hey, let's be like them. It makes no surprise that Christopher Columbus is sitting there raping the baby girls and genociding the fuck out of everybody. Rousseau and Nietzsche, I think, have their value, and so I want to keep them. Socrates, Aristotle, I just say that it's problematic, right? And I see that word sort of relative. But the idea of actually the philosophy of those folks is the ideas that come about them. So when people talk about the question of whether Jesus existed or not, then they say, well, did you believe in Socrates? How come you believe in Socrates? And then you have Christopher Hitchens' response to that, and his response to that is that Socrates, it doesn't matter if he existed or not. The importance of Socrates is the wisdom and the ideas that he put forth. And so therefore, one of the biggest things that I learned from Socrates was the wisdom is, a wise man admits his ignorance, whereas, the fool acts like he knows it all. So the wise man admits that he's ignorant, and that's how you learn new things, because you know what areas you're ignorant at, what areas you're an expert at. Therefore, it's an honest assessment of where you actually stand in the world. And I think that's really genius. So regardless if that came out of Socrates' mouth or if that came out of Mick Jagger's mouth, that philosophical notion is just absolutely, it's right and it makes sense. It's logical. So therefore, in the great pool of ideas, the best ideas should prevail. Along with the absence of literature in the lives of the young and their sexual but often unerotic related, right, we already said about this. So that's the closing of the American mind. So that's that's the beginning of why we have the Great Books program. So St. John's College, they have a school in Annapolis, Maryland, and in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And the Life of a Mind, I think it's absolutely genius. Now, the democracy is lacking. But there's a lot of really good things about it. So let me get to the political leadership before I get to some of the radical ways that they teach. So Annapolis leadership, you got a president, vice president, dean, assistant dean, graduate, treasurer, and then the faculty, right? So you have a hierarchy. There's your hierarchy right there. You have a three-tiered system. You have a hierarchical, very governed system. So I want to get away from that. And not to be relative, I want to eventually start nailing these things down, but by, with an open and reasoned mind. Now, St. John's College, the incredible things that comes out of St. John's College, they have, once the Great Books program is established, so once they have all these books, here's all the books, that are in the great St. John's curriculum. Once they have the books put down on paper, what we need to read and what we're supposed to read, then it becomes more sort of lax. So because we need to consider the great ideas of Western civilization, we talk to each other and we consider the ideas, we consider the things that we say. And when we do that, instead of having teachers, they have advisors. So it's a conversation between students instead of a conversation between teachers. So we have a conversation between the students about the greatest ideas in Western civilization. And there's got to be some, you got to feel pretty powerful to read Euclid Elements or to read Johannes Kepler Epitome 4 or the Bible. That if you want to, in fact, that's probably the best justification against Christianity. Just read the goddamn Bible. But Virgil, Plutarch. So you read these incredible, geniuses, and then you say, well, I think they're wrong, and or you think they're right. You sort of validate them, or you disagree with them, and then you hear what your peers say, and then that's how you articulate. You read the ideas, you say what you like about them, and then you build from there. And so I think it's incredible. I think that having the cornerstone, not Western civilization. I remember actually having a professor, I think Western society is just going to die. It's going to die. Well, white supremacy should die. What we need is the best civilizations. Chinese civilizations have been here for generations, okay? Longer than, I think, all other civilizations, and it's still here. So I think the longevity of it just is worthy of study. But also sort of how they divide their eras, how they divide, the ways that they look at it. They have I don't know, empire periods or something. They have different ways that they organize their history. We organize by decade here, but they organize it sort of by epochs, by a regime or the rule of a type of way. Sort of like, I guess, German history. When I think of German history, I think of the three Reichs, right? The Weimar Republic, and then sort of what we got today. And so you have periods that you think of instead of actual, just like the decades or the presidents or however you want to look at it. I want to actually talk more about the great books, because just look at this list. Look at this list. So Euclid Elements, Plutarch, Parallel Lives, Antoine Lavoisier, William Harvey, Motion of the Heart and Blood, essays by Archimedes, Gabriel Fahrenheit. I don't even know what things they're reading about it. Dmitri Mendeleev, Claude Louis Berthollet, Joseph Proust, Herodotus, Histories, Aristophanes, Plato, Aristotle, Francois Rabelais, Giovanni Pierluigi de Palestrina, Missa Papa Marcel. I don't know why they picked these ideas, and I don't know why they're valuable. I know some of these. Pascal, the generation of conic sections, so math. Rene Descartes, he had the method discourse on method, geometry. Johann Sebastian Bach, inventions. St. Matthew Passion. Johann Sebastian Bach, isn't that the composer? Joseph Haydn, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, operas. Ludwig van Beethoven's Third Symphony. Franz Schubert songs, Claudio Monteverdi, Igor Stravinsky, Symphony of Psalms, Niccolo Machiavelli, The Princess Discourses, Geoffrey Chaucer, The Canterbury Tales, Dante, Divine Comedy, Thomas Aquinas, Summa Theologica, Anselm of Canterbury, Proslogium. These words, man. Tacitus, Ptolemy, Tolenus, Lucretius, Plutarch, Virgil, Polonius, Aristotle, Miguel de Cervantes, Galileo Galilei, Two New Sciences, Don Quixote, Thomas Hobbes, Leviathan, Rene Descartes, Mediations, Rules for the Direction of the Mind, John Milton, Paradise Lost, Francois de la Rochefoucauld, Maximes. I like La Rochefoucauld. He says something about passions The time excites passions and diminishes small ones, just like the wind extinguishes a candle, but fans the flames. So that's just a fucking incredible one, right? Time diminishes small passions and exacerbates great passions. Jean de La Fontaine, Christian Huygens, George Eliot, Baruch Spinoza, John Locke, Jean Racine, Isaac Newton, Gottfried Leibniz, Supreme Court opinions, Wolfgang von Goethe, Faust, Charles Darwin, The Origin of Species. I've heard about him, but I've never actually read him. I like the W.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks. That's something good. That's something I think, because in general, black people have been sort of written out of Western society, so the fact that they actually include, some black geniuses. Now, I would also say Frederick Douglass needs to be in all these lists, and maybe even to Saint Louverture. Jonathan Swift, Gulliver's Travels, Daniel Boone really liked that. David Hume, Treatise of Human Nature. Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Social Contract, The Origin of Inequality. Les Misanthropes, Adam Smith, Wealth of Nations. Who's actually read these books? You read the books, and then you determine for yourself what you get out of them or what you don't get out of them. Immanuel Kant, Critique of Pure Reason. Something else that St. John's does is that they have an advisor, or that they have oral histories or oral tests. So you go through these classes, which, right, you have to read the books, you have to go to the classes, and you can have whatever discussions you want with them, right? Whatever takeaway you get out of the book. So the more that you put in it, the more that you actually get out of it. And so you read these books and you come to class. The advisors try to articulate a conversation about these books, and then the people, the students talk about it. The test that they have is an oral test. So at the end of the year, you talk about and you see if the idea is actually sunk into your brain. If the idea is actually sunk into your brain, then you should be able to talk about it. So many tests I've been able to cram the night before and then forget about the next day. How does that teach us jack shit? Declaration of Independence, Articles of Confederation, Constitution, the Federalist Papers, Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, Don Giovanni, Mark Twain, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. Genius book, right? Especially the all American novel, Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. William Wordsworth, the two-part Prelude of 1799, essays by Thomas Young, Brooke Taylor, Leonhard Euler, Daniel Bernoulli, Hans Christian Ørsted, Michael Faraday, James Clerk Maxwell, Gottfried Leibniz, Supreme Court, Nikolai Ivanovich Lobachevsky, Alexis de Tocqueville, Democracy in America, Soren Kierkegaard, Richard Wagner, Karl Marx, Capital, Fyodor Dostoevsky, the brothers Karamazov, Leo Tolstoy, War and Peace, Herman Melville, Benito Cereno, Mark Twain, The Adventures of Huckleberry Finn, twice, right, for the junior and senior year. Flannery O'Connor, Sigmund Freud, Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, The Souls of Black Folks, Edmund Husserl, Martin Heidegger, Albert Einstein, Joseph Conrad, William Faulkner, Gustave Flaubert, Virginia Woolf, Miss Dalloway, W.B. Yeats, T.S. Eliot, Wallace Stevens, Paul Valery, Arthur Rimbaud, and then essays by Faraday, Thompson, Minsky. I don't know any of these. Niels Bohr, he's the the man who made the atomic bomb. Gregory Mendel, he was a botanist. Right, so I mean, these ideas are just absolutely incredible. You get to the basic building blocks of life, why we're here, what we're doing, and I think once you start thinking about the building blocks, then and then you have a foundation, you can start to build off of it. So the justification, they said that you could go to St. John's College and you won't have specific skills such as engineering or welding, but you will have a strong sense of yourself and a strong sense of your mind and a strong sense of the ideas. And when you've considered a lot of these ideas, you'll question other ideas, and then eventually you'll come to, you'll come to sort of conclusions of which ideas you believe to be right. So this, I saw this one pamphlet that said the returning professors coming back to St. John's College is Pascal and John Milton and John Locke and Isaac Newton, Johannes Kepler, David Hume, Jonathan Swift, Adam Smith, Immanuel Kant, Mozart, Jane Austen, Declaration of Independence, right? So they have like these incredible geniuses. That's not, they do have advisors. They have professors that they call advisors, and they're supposed to just provoke the conversation, which I'm sure, since they are part of faculty and they're getting paid, they probably have a greater influence than what I would say that they have credit to. But because I believe wholeheartedly in the great book's premise, You know, they maybe, I mean, Western civilization, I think, had succeeded largely through luck, being you know, part of the germs, guns, and steel, right? The luck of the draw, just being in the right place at the right time. And so being at the right place at the right time was enabled them to be able to succeed. And they also had a penchant for barbarism, which, you know, was unseen anywhere else. So they didn't mind ravaging entire nations, genociding, murdering entire, you know, like the Pilgrims, just wiping out all those Pequot men, women, and children, old men, women, and children, old men and women. So Igor Stravinsky, Symphony of Psalms, right? All these are the professors that's returning to St. John's College. And instead of having an entire year of just reading this stuff, I would just introduce them, because then you have the basic framework from which to stem off of. You know, we have democracy, the parliamentary procedures, relationships, because relationships are tough. If you're just like, I'm right all the time and shut your mouth and you want everybody to be your slave, you know, you're going to turn into a little Hitler. You got to have, you know, you got to be able to work on cooperation and consensus building and get people to, you know, agree with where you're coming from. So, you know, I think relationships are hard and tough, but I think that they're essential in order to, you know, when the point of education eventually is to get a good job. I was actually thinking about the idea how I have, like, for the first 10 years, the wild child does whatever they want, and then after the first 10 years, for 8 years, they have to work on being who they're going to be in society. And the person working on being who they want to be in society will kind of resent it. They like the complete freedom of childhood to being able to do what they want to do. And if they try to say, well, they have more power than me, and in a way they have more freedom than you, but you'll have more power because the things that you're studying will eventually get you to make and work, and then you'll become independent and you'll be able to make money. You'll have power. So with those things, you'll actually get more freedom than what they're getting, because the children would actually only have the freedom that is bequested upon, bequeathed upon them, you know, just the money of their parents. And so therefore, do they know how to make money? Do they know how to go out and hustle and do their own thing? So even though there is some type of conformity with the latter part, it's because you got to be, you know, you have to be of some use to somebody else. And so somebody else has to be able to get something out of you. That's all they give a shit about. Now, are you a doctor? Are you an expert? Are you able to fix this? Are you able to do the surgery? Are you able to, you know, can you do the things that I need for you to do? And if you can do the things, then I can pay you and make money. You are used, you get something out of it. And so you have to be of some use to society. If I'm just a nice guy, that ain't going to do it. That ain't going to cut it. You got to have more than just that. You got to have some value that you actually give back. And so, you know, all those ideas, I would love to have a conversation with all those ideas. I'm going to talk about Reggio Emilia and some of the other things, Montessori. The great books, I think I probably could just keep on talking on and on about. Here they have Plato, Sophocles, Plutarch, Bible, St. Augustine, Montaigne, Shakespeare, John Locke, Swift, Gibbon. So a lot of the similar ones, you know, Karl Marx. Not only is he like a big communist, but he also wrote a lot of history. When Karl Marx talks about Abraham Lincoln just being sort of a citizen king, that's incredible. And Lincoln is like one of the greatest presidents America has ever seen. He had a revolution. He completely changed how American society is. And there's actually, I'm reading this book called Black Boy, and there was an old granddaddy that was worried that the Civil War was going to resume even after the war was over. He said that he had a delusion that it was going to resume. The Civil War hasn't stopped. I mean, the red states that you see today, that's the old South. That's the old Confederate South. And even kind of more scary is that's where most black folks actually live. So segregation, they've been able to survive, but they're surviving in a very racist institutions. So that's, you know, something there. So Shakespeare, Plato, Aristotle, Plutarch. So a lot of the same Tacitus, Aquinas, Machiavelli, Hobbes, Leviathan, Shakespeare, Montesquieu, Rousseau, Kant, J.S. Mill, Hegel, J.S. Mill, Euclid, Archimedes, Nicomachus, Archimedes, Ptolemy, Copernicus, Kepler. So this is just another different reading list of their great ideas. And I think these ideas are absolutely, they're genius. This is, in my holidays for the revolutionary humanist, actually I should be just celebrating all the passings of these incredible works, right? A scientific revolution just cannot be argued. If you was to take all the things we've learned in science and throw them away and have people rediscover them, they would find the exact same things that we've already discovered. And so, you know, a scientific revolution is impossible to ignore. You can ignore it if you want to, but you'll do so at your own peril. because future generations will pick it up and they'll just assume that what you said was truth. And so you know, Galileo, he said that the earth wasn't the center of the universe, that the earth revolved around the sun. The Catholic Church persecuted him, and he you know, I think he died disgraced. And so that's you know, that's the Galileo Galilei, right? So just because the people in his time had shitted on his ideas, who the fuck questions that we revolve around the sun versus the sun revolving around the earth? Well, I see the sun come up and over, so you know, I feel self-important, so it's all about me, me, me. So I don't know. I'm having a reevaluation of values too. Nietzsche's been getting into me recently, but that's a little bit about the Great Books program in St. John's College. There's other things I'm gonna consider: Waldorf and Reggio Emilia, child-led homeschooling. You know, child-led homeschooling. That's for the first 10 years, of course. What they want to learn is what they shall learn. And there's play, and it's fun, and they have lots of cool things to do. And so I like the idea of Reggio Emilia, and I like the Reggio Emilia approach, which was developed by Loris Malaguzzi. He's an Italian educator. This is translated so it doesn't come out. But they said that the game and the work, the reality and the fantasy, science and imagination, heaven and earth, the reason and dream are things. They're not together. Thus they tell that the 100 is not there. The child says the 100 is there. So the big thing about Reggio Emilia is that they have 100 languages that they speak. There's 100 different ways that a child can express themselves. And so they try to articulate all 100 ways. So for the first 10 years of life, the Jean-Jacques, I think I should actually, I call it the Freedom School because I like the idea of the sort of the black movement, the black schools, and I like freedom too. But it's really a Jean-Jacques Rousseau type idea. You let the wild child be who they are. They develop their own passions and ambitions and figure out who they actually are. And then once they find out who they are, then you got to sort of get that wild child who doesn't hurt anybody. So it's wild, but not in a bad way, because that's the only rule you have as a child: don't hurt anybody. So you can study, you can be curious, take long walks, experiment, observe, do whatever it is you want to do that strikes your fancy. But after that, you got to be, you know, put into a sort of a structure so that way you can achieve great things. But we have 100 languages. If children have 100 languages, we all have 100 languages. And how many languages do you know about yourself? Modern day American education systems completely fucked us over. It's all about blind obedience to arbitrary authority. And no wonder, you know, when cops murder people, people don't say, wait a second, that's wrong. Because just, you know, that's a reflection of the American people, the fascist, totalitarian, Nazi character of the American people. When I went to school, I don't remember them being total assholes, but I do remember, you know, them being very obedient to their masters. And so if they're obedient to their masters, then they, you know, there is no sort of relationships or bonding or grouping. But also if they're weak, if you're born weak, then you know, defer to somebody strong. Well, I'm weak, but you know, that Arnold Schwarzenegger and that Clint Eastwood, he's got something going. He makes a lot of, John Wayne, he's a great philosopher. And so you defer to these strong people because you're a weak-minded piece of shit yourself. And, you know, that's why we bomb all these countries in all the Middle East and shit. You're a weak-minded fucking fool, and so you defer yourself to supposed war, and like you're being strong and shit, but they're chicken hawks. A bunch of fucking chicken hawks. And they say war, 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 but they only want to send other people to go to war when they themselves don't actually fight the fucking battles. So that's a Great Books program. I'm going to stop it here and resume this a little bit later.